First of all, if this video gets any views other than myself, I'll be pretty happy with that. Alright, so a while back I noticed something about my taste in music, that the majority of the time I tend to prefer the earlier half of an artist or band's career. This trend is so consistent that it's actually kinda hard to find an example of a band where this is not the case. When I mentioned this pattern to a couple friends of mine, one said he agreed and the other not so much. So it's fair to say that this tendency to prefer the early years of a musician's career is not relatable to some. But if it is to you, perhaps my findings can explain your habits and music preference as well as my own. The first and most obvious thing is vocal decline. While obviously all instruments involved in a song contribute to its final sound, I find myself most attracted to the vocals. And I assume that's the case for most. For many such as myself, it's more fun to sing along to our favorite songs than it is to learn the rhythm guitar or bass line alone. Plus, our voice goes with us everywhere we go. We don't need a giant case and an empty trunk of our car to transport our voice. So with that said, as a singer ages and inevitably experiences a vocal decline, the songs they record may lose that sound that caused us to fall in love with them in the first place. Some examples of artists I love where this vocal decline is apparent would be Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones, Roger Daltrey and the Who, or Paul McCartney throughout his solo career. I mean, would you rather listen to Quadrophenia or Endless Wire, Ram or New? While there is a chance some of you chose the newer records, I bet most wouldn't. Actually, I bet nobody's watching in the first place. But you see how vocal decline is the most obvious reason to lean towards earlier material. However, this rule fails to explain why I prefer the early sounds of bands such as the Beatles and the Police, whose time together was too short to allow for a significant vocal deterioration. This brings us to my second theory, that over time, an artist will reject the formula that brought them initial success and branch out into more avant-garde and experimental sounds. If this theory is part of the reason why I prefer early music, which I believe it is, it would be fair to claim that I personally prefer upbeat poppy music over the abstract. In the first part, vocal decline, I presented some would-you-rather scenarios that I believe most of us can agree on. However, this part is where it should be a split. In fact, I might be in the minority here. Would you rather listen to Synchronicity or Outlandos de More? How about Sgt. Pepper's or Please Please Me? Of you chose the first option for both scenarios, I'd choose the second for both. In fact, it's not even close. As much as I love Sgt. Pepper's, in a scenario where I had to choose between two records, the other of which I could never listen to again, I'd give it up in a heartbeat for Please Please Me, or any other Beatles album leading up to its release. As controversial as that statement may be, it's just my personal opinion. But my point of making this video is not to share my opinions, it's to try and find potential reasons for those opinions that could also explain the opinions of anyone with similar or even contrasting views. So that brings us to the third part of the video, which is intertwined with the second part, high BPM. My logic here is that as artists get more experimental, their songs have lower BPMs and less energy than previously. And if this theory is part of the reason why I prefer early music, the claim here would be that I prefer faster and more energetic songs. And if you too find yourself gravitating towards earlier material, you might as well. Alright, so what I've done here is use this website called Tunebat.com. It'll tell you the key in BPM of any song you search, and as a way of calculating energy, danceability, and happiness of songs in the most objective way possible. I added up the given BPM values for each song on an album, then divided the total by the number of tracks, giving me a good average for the entire album. I would then do the same thing for the energy ratings of the songs. Admittedly, I could have weighted the data based on the duration of the tracks to get as accurate measurements as possible. However, using the basic method that I did, the trend is easy to see anyway. So let's continue using our last two examples. Let's start with The Police. When comparing the two albums I mentioned earlier, it turns out both the BPM and average energy rating of Synchronicity are significantly lower than that of Outlandos de More. This supports the theory that the earlier stages bring about more fast and energetic songs. Now let's look at the Beatles. Since they're my favorite band of all time, I decided to dig a little deeper here. I selected 5 albums that span the length of their discography, and the trend is present once again.
It's gonna be a drag misery. Hold me close and tell me how you feel. When I call you up, you're lying. If I sang out a tune, would you stand up and walk out on me? Won't you?
The only real outlier here is that Abbey Road's average BPM slightly exceeds that of Rubber Soul's and Sgt. Pepper's. My fourth theory, albeit a weak theory, is that when I hear songs, perhaps my envisionment of the story and process of making that song affects my mood when hearing it. Like when I hear All My Loving, maybe I picture 4 happy young men taking over America via the Ed Sullivan Show, artificially boosting my opinion of the song. And then when I hear Get Back, maybe I picture 3 angry young men and a neglected Ringo, constantly arguing and recording songs separately and secretly from one another, which would have the opposite effect. I don't know. Oh, and one last thing. When I said before how tricky it was to find examples where this trend does not exist for me, I meant it. The only 2 examples I could think of where this pattern is not noticeable would be Creedence Clearwater Revival and Tom Petty / Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. In both of these cases, we're talking about bands that found a formula that worked and never fully abandoned it. Also, both are examples where the vocal decline is less apparent. For example, Tom Petty's vocal timbre in The Waiting so closely resembles that of The Last DJ, recorded 20 years later. As for Creedence, I think the extreme brevity of their time together plays to their advantage here. They stayed true to their formula and didn't last long enough to allow a real vocal decline to occur. So that's all I have to say in this video. Comment below if you notice this trend in your music taste or not. Also, I'd like to hear if you think any of my theories are a good explanation to your findings. Thank you for watching.